All right, hello and welcome again, everyone. Thank you for being here for our first of two sessions that we were offering, info sessions about the Fast Tracking Founders Competition. We're very excited about being able to offer this. And in a moment, I'll go ahead and pass it on to my colleagues, Jennifer Mangold, as well as Tarek Zodi, to be able to say a few words before we eventually turn it over for the bulk of the this meeting and discussion. We will have Laleh Shayesteh from Berkeley's IPIRA office be able to talk more about not only intellectual property, but also some more details related to this competition, related to intellectual property rights, and just some more information that you'll want to be able to have. And we can make this a very open discussion where you can, just ask questions. And yeah, it'll be a pretty informal, intimate discussion. So just a little overview about why we're here. So we're here to learn more about the Fast Tracking Founders competition, which is a really cool contest, which we started a couple of years ago. I want to say this might be our third year running this event. And this is an opportunity for students to be able to receive financial assistance in the form of reimbursements for the application process for applying for a provisional patent. Provisional patent being the first of two steps to be able to get an idea or an invention patented. And you are also here because you are interested, you feel like you're, whether it's your capstone project, individual research that you're doing or what have you, that your project, you feel that it is very unique, that you're offering something that's just really not out there in the marketplace, and something that you feel like can really revolutionize the industry. So just to review some details around, so folks who are eligible to apply for this competition, one, you need to be a student in one of COE's professional master's programs. So MEng, MTM, MSSE, MDes, etc. You should have received approval from a project sponsor. So that's either an industry or a faculty representative. So if you plan to apply, that's something that you definitely want to do ahead of time. And you also want to make sure that the entire team, if you're working with a team, that the entire team, for example, the capstone team, is on board with applying for this competition. It's very much an all or nothing thing. It can't be where some folks are interested and some folks might be reluctant. You want to make sure that the entire team is on board to apply and to participate. And again, the benefits of applying go beyond, I would say, just the possibility of winning. I think the experience itself is really informative, especially if any of you ever want to be able to apply for a patent moving forward. This experience of this process could be very valuable for you, even if you don't happen to win. But that said, I wanted to just go ahead and turn it over to Jennifer Mangold, if you wanted to say a few words or anything, and after that, we'll turn it over to Tarek, followed by Laleh.
Yeah, I was going to go ahead and introduce Laleh, but Tarek, do you want to say anything about the program and history before I do that?
Sure. So the professional master's programs have a fairly long history in the College of Engineering, almost 50 years, maybe even now 60 years old. And it wasn't until roughly about 10 years ago where the college really then took a renewed, vigorous interest in engaging with industry and turned the professional master's programs into sort of what they are now, which is definitely outward facing and looking towards industrial collaboration. Generally, one thing that is important about these programs is they're usually short. They're only 9 months long. And so typically the problem is that students usually are rushing to finish what may be potentially a real blockbuster idea, and then they get a job and they leave. And they never kind of take that final step of taking it to market, if it is worthy of being taken to market, or having a patent filed because simply they run out of time. So to solve that problem, we came up with this paradigm roughly about 2 years ago with Alex Belyaeff and Rich Lyons and Laleh and myself, and now Jennifer and Walter. And the idea is that we would create something like a Shark Tank, where you would basically come in, present your best idea, and then have a board judge whether this was feasible or not. And then the winners would then be given a chance to have their patents filed, at least provisional patents. And Laleh will talk a lot about exactly what that paradigm is, to get the experience of taking what is potentially a really good idea to the next stage. So this program is designed as an add-on to MEng, MTM, MDes, MDev, all of the different master's programs that we have in the college, is to take it to that next level. Now, the ground rules are somewhat important. Your industrial sponsor, if you have one, has to agree. We don't want to get into some patent fights or legal fights with anybody, so they have to really agree. The potential faculty member involved has to agree, because that could be her or his research, so they may not necessarily want this to happen. And then all the team members have to agree. So this takes the potential 1,200 MEng and MTM and MDes students in the college, there are roughly 1,200 of them, and starts to narrow it down to a reasonable number. Maybe a couple of hundred students of that subset want to do it. Of them, we then pick, depending upon what they propose, we're able to pick then the teams that might be able to go forward. So that's the genesis of the program, and I hand it back now to Jennifer.
Thank you, Tarek, for sharing that. Yeah, so I wanted the guest that we're all waiting for, and I want to introduce Laleh in more detail. She's the Director of Administration and Associate Director of the Office of Technology Licensing with IPIRA. So this is at UC Berkeley. She works on developing the IP strategy and oversees licensing for all the different fields, from life sciences to software technologies, familiar in copyright matters and trademark and open source compliance. So very well versed in the IP landscape. But prior to that, but before practicing law, she has experience in genetics research and cancer research from Stanford, UCSF, and University of Chicago. She comes from a really wonderful background of scientific and understanding, the development of this technology, and then now overlaid with the IP understandings and how to license some of that technology. So really excited. And thank you so much, Laleh, for joining us today and being here to answer questions students have about the process.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Nice to meet everybody here, and welcome to the program. That's awesome. Thank you for being here. And so I can take this two different ways. I can either provide you with a presentation and then wait for your questions, or I can answer any questions you have first. I think perhaps providing you with a presentation on IP in general might be a better way to proceed. So unless you disagree, I'll go ahead with the presentation, if that's okay. All right. I tend to speak really quickly, really fast, so please stop me and ask your questions. Intellectual property talks are usually about as exciting as a coma-inducing drug, so seriously, ask your questions. This will make it a lot more interactive. I can share my screen. Okay, let's see. Yay. How can I share my screen? Let me see. How can I share my...
I made it sharing privileges, so you should be able to, just at the bottom where it says share screen.
I did that, but it's, okay, let me see. Let me see if it doesn't allow me to share my desktop. Okay, let me see. That's hilarious. Okay. All right, let's see. So it's not going to let me do this until I, until I get out of Zoom completely and come back in. Or I can send you my my presentation and you can share it. if you like.
Walter just made you the host. Do you want to try one more time? And then if not, I guess, yeah,
Sure.
Walter, if you want to drive the slides.
I can do this. Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. All right. Can you see my screen? Is that okay? All right. So let's talk about intellectual property. I would like to let you know about what we believe intellectual property to be, how it can be protected for most of the time, because we are really interested in actual patenting process, patenting an invention. We will overview the patent process, and then how much a patent really costs from start to finish in its lifetime, and how we look at portfolio strategy, which is probably something you should be thinking about if you were to develop a portfolio of patent applications as well, and how UC looks at licensing. All right, so intellectual property, or IP, is defined as scientific and technical information, know-how, data, design, process, procedure, material, compound, software programs, works of authorship, trademarks, and inventions. Basically, the way I like to look at it is it's everything that's in between the two ears, seriously, right? And so it is worth protecting, especially when you have something new and useful on your hands. There are various ways of protecting IP. One of them is as trade secrets and know-how, which means that you keep the stuff to yourself. The other one is copyrights, which protects expressions, but not ideas. We'll go through them. Trademarks, which protect the brand, and patents, which protect inventions. And then the last form of protecting IP, which can come in as one of the most important ones a lot of times, is through agreements. And we will go through that as well. So trade secrets and know-how are generally information that are not known within the trade or industry, right? Because they provide a competitive advantage to a company. However, at the university, we don't keep trade secrets, and we don't keep know-how, because we publish everything, right? But who can tell me what a trade secret? Who knows a good trade secret? Like, do you know what is kept as a trade secret in the industry for almost forever? Go ahead.
I don't know. I'm not saying anything about technology, but I think like some recipes, right? Some like fast food recipes, or I think about restaurants, some of those like secret sauces, I think.
Exactly. Coca-Cola is a trade secret. Just so you know, right? The recipe for Coca-Cola, that recipe for KFC. Usually these are kept as trade secrets. In the pharmaceutical industry, for example, the way, you know, sometimes the method of producing a chemical in the information and in the physical sciences industry, exact dimensions of how a piece of equipment will fit into everything else. Those are kept as trade secrets for the longest time before anybody will want to file a patent application on them, or if they ever do. The other one are trademarks, the other way of protecting intellectual property, which are words or symbols associated with goods or services that should distinguish them in a marketplace, right? So for example, the name of UC Berkeley. Berkeley is very fierce about keeping its name and its trademark, especially when it comes to its athletics, when it comes to its education, right? In every single agreement that I do, even as licensing is concerned, we want to make 1,000,000% sure that the licensee or the other party will never use Berkeley's name in vain, or want to pass off that they're doing something with Berkeley or under Berkeley's name when they're not. So that becomes really, really important. So as you go on into your future, perhaps if you start a startup, you may want to be careful and choose a trademark to distinguish yourself, your goods or services from very early on. Copyrights protect original works of authorship. So they can come in as software that is written down, artistic works that are fixed in a tangible form. For example, some of the, actually a dance score is a copyrightable subject matter. A lot of software at UCB, with all that said, a lot of software at UCB is actually released under a permissive license, even though UC has the copyright for them. We still release them under a license that allows everybody to use them as well. Then patents, which are close to everybody's heart, right? It's a grant of right to exclude others from making, using, or selling your invention in exchange for teaching it to the public. So a patent application or a patent from the first date of filing lives for 20 years, exactly for 20 years. Unless, for example, in the biological or chemical industries, one can go through the FDA and get a few years of extension. Otherwise, a patent lives from the day, a patent application or a patent rights live from the day that a patent is filed to the day that it expires, 20 years. And finally, the last way of protecting your intellectual property is through agreements, such as what are known as non-disclosure agreements. As scientists, a lot of us want to work, we don't work in a vacuum. We want to work with our partners in other institutions, or perhaps we want to present our ideas to industry. And perhaps your idea is not fully baked and perhaps we have not filed an application on it yet. It becomes really important to enter into what is known as a non-disclosure agreement with the other party, basically saying that I'm giving you this idea, I'm providing you with the idea that I have, but you're not going to be allowed to provide this idea to anybody else for example, let's say 5 years or until I have disclosed it. Becomes really, really important when we don't have patent applications or written software already in place. Now, do I have any questions before I go on? Now that we went through the agreement or through the different ways of protecting IP. No, okay. So as far as patents are concerned.
I'm sorry, I had a question that I
go ahead.
I was just wondering, so I've started working with classmates and I doubt that they're really interested in working for any possible competitor that's in the market right now, but is there any like precedent, or do you have any comments on the idea of asking them to sign a non-compete? I know that non-competes are kind of not legal in, I think, SF, but I'm not certain of that in California or elsewhere.
So you're saying that you're going to ask them to not work on the same technology with anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, they've already signed an NDA, but with respect to anything that potentially could be ideated by someone else, but worked on by them.
So non-competes, right? Can have, so in your agreements, you could have non-competes that are for a certain period of time, but they cannot be for an unusually long period of time, right? And you, under California law, it's actually illegal to ask for 100% non-compete. You cannot say that today you're going to be working for my company, let's say for UC Berkeley, on let's say a cell phone, but then tomorrow you will not be able to work with any other company that works on cell phones because you might be giving my idea away. That just doesn't work that way. A non-confidential disclosure, an NDA is probably the best way to go about it, right? Because it forces their hand, right, for a specific period of time to not disclose this technology to anyone else. Within that time, hopefully you have been able to yourself file a patent application and move the patent application along and kick the tires with other industry members yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I had another question. I was reviewing your website and within the what's it called?
Is it IPIRA?
Yeah, IPIRA. And I mean, when I first decided to come to Cal, IPIRA and all of these resources is one of the reasons, or were one of the reasons that I wanted to really, try this. And there are a lot of options out there, and I haven't looked at all of them, but are there any that are mutually exclusive of one another? Like you can't enter one thing, or something that you would recommend is done before? Like this, I feel like this competition is the one that might be really good to start first, but are there any others that you think I should just stay away from if I were to enter this one, or any other advice that's related to conceivably participating in more than one of the resources that is available through IPIRA?
So IPIRA basically provides through IPIRA website itself or through Begin, right? begin.berkeley.edu. We provide all the resources that you could apply to, and you should apply to all of them. Most people apply to all of them, and that's perfectly fine. That's what we want, right? Because it is possible that you may want, once you have applied to them, one may be a lot more desirable, or they may want you a lot more than the others, and until you find synergy. And I think you should be applying to all of them, or any of them that you can. I think that's an excellent idea, and that's why those resources are out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So moving right along, if you're looking at a patent or an invention, what can be patented? So under US patent law, anything under the sun modified by a human that is novel. Novel meaning nobody else has done it before. Non-obvious, meaning that most pieces nowadays, or most inventions nowadays, are an amalgamation of 2 or 3 different pieces. But the way you put these together is completely non-obvious, or not easy to try, or not obvious to try, right? And it needs to be useful. So, for example, useful means if you have created a car, right? It's not going to be useful for a car to, I've created a car so I can crash and burn it. That's not going to be a useful car. But a car that can, for example, be self-driving or this and that, but it has a good use, will be patentable. And a patent application needs to also teach a person of ordinary skill in the art. Ordinary skill in the art means somebody who understands it the way you do, right? Not somebody who is really, really good at it, and not somebody who's is in a completely different field, but somebody who's in your field, such as yourself, like yourself, that can understand it, who can understand it. And basically, they can pick up the patent application, go to their laboratory, and recreate your invention, right? So a patent needs to have that much information in it. So it needs to be describing it, and it needs to describe the invention to somebody who can understand it. So if you have an invention on a software or non-software, what do you do, right? Usually, if you're at Berkeley, you come speak with us, right? So disclosures are at ipira.berkeley.edu under IP protection. And for this program, we have already altered the disclosure document to fit the program. So it's already at your disposal. And I believe that Walter probably has a copy of that invention disclosure. All right, so if we are looking at a patent application, let's say that we really, really want to now file a patent application. What do? We have an invention and we want to protect it because we want to start a company. The way we handle it, usually at UC and just about anywhere else I've ever been, the very first filing that we do is what is known as a provisional application, and it's available in the US. Provisional application means an application that will never get examined. It lives for only 1 year. And it's basically a document that tells the government, the patent office, I have this invention. I would like to kick the tires on it. I would like to develop it a little bit further and see if I get interest in it. And if I get interested in it, then I will continue on with it. If you file a provisional application and you never receive interest in it, or you don't want to continue on it yourself, you don't have to go through the next stage of filing. And that application basically evaporates, it vanishes, and nobody will ever know about it. However, let's say that you continue to be extraordinarily interested. A year has passed, you're receiving a lot of interest. Let's say you're starting your own company, VCs are getting interested. You want to enter into the next stage. And usually the next stage, or the best stage, would be what is known as an international application. Because now, first you said, I'm going to have an application in the US. The next stage is, okay, world, I have an invention and I want to protect this invention. And that patent application, which is also known as a patent cooperation treaty or a PCT patent application, lives for another 18 months. Some documents go back and forth, but really you don't need to do anything about that application either. Except that the PCT application is a lot more expensive than the original application. The original application can be about $5,000-ish, sometimes up to about $10,000, but the PCT is at least $10,000 and up. And then now thinking about the timeline from the start of the provisional to the end of PCT, there's a 12-month and an 18-month. So you have 30 months or 2.5 years now to have kicked around your invention. And if you're still interested in going, then we go to the next stage, which is when a patent application gets really expensive. Because that's the stage where you want to enter into specific, what are known as jurisdictions or countries. So for example, US is one jurisdiction, Europe is another jurisdiction, and then Middle East is another, different jurisdictions. And that's when different patent offices actually pick up the patent application and start examining it. And that's when an application becomes really, really expensive. So you need to have a lot of money and a lot of trust and a lot of commercial interest to make sure that you're gonna want to continue on with the patent application. I have always said that if there is no commercial interest in a patent application and there is intent to move ahead with it, a patent application becomes an extraordinarily expensive publication. Because if without commercial interest, there would have been no difference between publishing a paper versus filing this patent application. All right, so if we were to review, like at UC, a patent application, I look at the patent value, right? Is it a fundamental application? Is it a blocking application? Is it a really, really important one? Or, and is it easy to get around or not, right? So for example, if we have a brand new variety of plant, nobody else has seen it before, nobody else has had it before, that's a fundamental one, right? But if you have a design, and I'm just making things up, right? So if you have a small design alteration for a chip that is going to sit in a much larger, let's say, camera, is that blocking? Probably not. Is it easy to design around? Probably yes. Is it easy to detect if somebody is infringing it? Probably not at all. It's not going to be easy to open up every camera and see what it is doing, right? So we need to be intelligent about what it is that we are filing on as far as our inventions are concerned. So the patent value, then the business value, right? What is the commercial potential? What are you bringing to the table that nobody else has and people will be interested in? Is it going to be a big market size, or is it going to be a really, really small market size? What would be your business model? And these are things that you will need to think about when you want to make your pitch decks to the VCs, right? Is it aligned with industry trends and Cost benefit analysis you need to do a little bit. So for example, is the market going to have to move a heck of a whole lot, right, to change, to actually adapt your invention, or is it going to be an easy exchange for them, right? If it is going to be a huge alteration for a market shift, for the market to shift, to be able to adopt your technology, it may not go too far unless there is a huge push in the market in general towards that technology. Let's say like impossible meats, right? And finally, it needs to be technically sound. It should actually be working. And we have to also be really careful about the legal matters, right? So for example, if you have already published your stuff, if you have already talked about it with others before we file the patent application, you have already lost all rights in filing around the world. Done. As far as the world is concerned, you still have a little bit of time in the US, but if somebody else beats you to the patent office based on what you told them, they win. You don't win anymore. So it's really, really important to keep your stuff to yourself or really protect it legally. And do you have commercial rights to the technology to move ahead with it? If you developed it with somebody else, is everybody on board to go ahead with this technology? And I want to always say that, remember that the technology, an improvement in a technology is not necessarily a need in the marketplace. So you need to be really important. You need to be really careful to make sure that you are actually scratching an itch instead of providing a brand new technology that may not necessarily, that the market may not necessarily be that interested in. So if we were to look at the different industries, right, for strategy, and this is something you need to think about as you go on, right? We look at the different industries and our patenting strategy based on how the industry looks at patents and their importance. So if you are in, which most of you are in the chemicals, instruments, pharmaceuticals, bioindustries, then the objective is monopoly, and you want to protect for as much as you can, as far and wide as you can. If we're dealing with software and internet technologies, about the best places and the biggest places that fight over such technologies is in the US. So you just want to leverage where competitors are going to be infringe your, are going to be infringing your product. And that leverage mostly happens in the US, where people go to fight. And finally, then this is probably not something that you'll be interested in, but as you go on, if you might need other people's technologies, you need to deal with technology transfer agreements, of which there are a few, right? One are called letter agreements, which are really simple documents that for a small amount of money allow you to work on the technology in-house to see if it works in your hands before you move on. It also helps the VCs to know that you probably have your hands on a technology, for example, if it's coming out of someplace else that you need in addition with what you're developing yourself. An option agreement is an overgrown letter agreement. Basically, it's a letter agreement also, again, allowing you to work on the technology in-house, in your company only. You cannot sell it, you cannot transfer it, you cannot license it out. But you can work on the technology further. It's a little bit more expensive than a simple letter agreement. And finally, we have license agreements. You might need to enter into license agreements, which will allow you the commercial use of your the other party's intellectual property. Okay, and let me ask before I do this, do any of you deal with licenses? I mean, with software? Yeah, okay. So for software, there are different modes of licensing them as well. One are open source, and Berkeley is really big on open source licenses. In fact, the BSD license, the Berkeley Software Development License, was born at Berkeley, and I can say that it is probably one of the only licenses that Berkeley went to fight for, big litigation with Microsoft, to get the right to be able to open source. This is a lot of years ago, and that's how BSD license was born. The other way to license software would be through commercial licenses, just like any other license agreement. And finally, a dual license. Berkeley does a lot of dual licenses as well. Dual license says, for example, if you want to work on this non-commercially, go ahead and do so. But if you want to you want to start using and selling products or the software itself that I have developed, you're going to need a commercial license from me. Come to me, which is what we do. And that's all I have as far as my presentation is concerned. Now, as far as the program is concerned, I guess you might have some questions on how the IP here is going to work. So last year, along with Tarek and the other developers of the program and Rich, what we did is, if your technology is one of the winners under this FastTracking Founders program, what I have done is we will be introducing you to counsel who really is knowledgeable in your technology area, and UC will pay for a provisional filing. So the counsel will work with you to file that provisional application. If you or your colleagues who are UC students, but not, for example, UC grad students, and if you have developed the technology without using UC resources, meaning significant UC resources, meaning, for example, under an NIH grant, under a DARPA grant, under a sponsor agreement, then the IP is yours, entirely yours. This is a service that UC wanted to provide, so we will help you file, and you will pay for the filing, but then UC will reimburse you if you're one of the winners of the program. So basically that first 1 year time period is now yours. Go ahead and kick the tires on your technology with your patent application, bring it up to potential VCs or those who are interested, and see if they're interested. And if they are, then move ahead. You know, we have no claims on that technology at all. If you might be working with someone who is a Berkeley employee, such as a grad student or a postdoc, then they become inventors of the technology as well along with you, then we will be joint owners of the technology. And you can still go ahead with your technology. As joint owners, each party can do with the technology as they want. If we know that, for example, the students are interested together to go ahead with the company, Berkeley is hands off. Berkeley is not going to intervene. And that's how the program will be unfolding. Meanwhile, as you're going through the program, I would be more than happy to answer any IP related questions that you might have. If you have questions of what to do next, does this count as IP? You know, how do I count? You know, if you have one, you know, what to do with the outside counsel and everything beyond that. I'm again more than happy to answer your questions. So any questions you may have now? I'm going to stop sharing my screen if I can find it. Okay, there you go. Stop sharing my screen. All right.
So I had a question. So due to the fact that I'm in a program that has a very limited time frame, and that being in this program provides access to resources that I otherwise wouldn't have, some of my classes have been an opportunity for me to spend time on fulfilling an academic related assignment, but using the time to work on the idea. There hasn't been too much technical work none of the technical work has been exposed, but some of the idea has been exposed in presentations that were required for the class. I could conceivably, what my question is leading up to is like, would you mind, as part of this process, to review what I disclosed to give your opinion on whether I've already disclosed too much?
Sure. And the suggestion that I always have when people are ready to disclose their stuff is tell people what you have, but not how you did it, right? You know, that secret recipe you keep to yourself, but tell them what you have. Like, I have A, B, and C, but I'm not going to tell you exactly how I do it, because you don't have to.
Okay, so even to you all, like what I have, but not how.
So as part of your program, if you will need to come up with the how, remember that you will own that IP, right? And if you enter into the competition and you win, you still own the IP. And the campus community is under this non-disclosure obligation anyway. So what I would suggest you do, right, is when you're producing and providing these disclosures, to put down at the very beginning of your presentation that this is confidential to, this is confidential information that I'm providing, which is perfectly fine. That's part of your learning experience, but do say that this is confidential subject matter. Please don't disclose outside of UC.
Okay. There's a deck that has it on every single slide.
And you're good to go.
Yeah, I just didn't say it, but
That's
it's
okay.
on. Yeah.
That's perfectly fine.
All right, thank you. I'm going to have a lot of questions because that's my nature, but they're not going to come up like within this hour. Would it be okay to email you or anyone else on this call with them, or who's the best resource?
You're always welcome. So no other people in our group are or in the OTL are not responsible for this program. So you're always more than welcome to send me your questions. Absolutely,
And
happy to respond.
Ramel, I just want to highlight that I did add Laleh's email in the chat, so that way you can touch base with her if you have any further questions. And Laleh, a little late response to this, but I did share the invention disclosure form in the chat as well, the link to that.
Perfect. Thank you.
So you mentioned also that there's funding that's available through different U.S. government organizations, and I'm wondering which one of those might be more or less predisposed to funding my idea. I have not looked into much of that because it's like just a bit overwhelming. And I guess if I provided you with the deck that explains the idea, would you mind letting me know which one I should really prioritize?
Sure. So in general, for government funding, government doesn't fund individuals, government funds entities. So, and as an individual who's starting a business, probably, right, a small business, the best place to go would be to an SBIR or an STTR. So specific portions of the government do have SBIR or STTR grants. So the way that it works is they will give you money as an entity, right? So let's say your company, your small company who is trying to address a problem that the government is interested in, right? And if you file and receive an SBIR or STTR grant, then that grant is supposed to be shared with a larger institution. For example, let's say that as a small business, you're not going to be able to single-handedly do all of the work in your company, right? And you're going to need help from an institution, let's say UC Berkeley, UCSF, whoever. And a portion of that money you can sub-grant to a university, and then you guys work with each other. Ultimately, if you have already created the IP, well, you have already created the IP. If you haven't created the IP, you can get an option to the IP that the university will produce or the nonprofit will produce.
Okay. But this program is more geared towards individuals, or it requires university involvement?
That still requires a nonprofit, another entity involvement, because it does not, I don't think it's created to just pay a small business, right? Plus, as a small business or as an individual, you're gonna have to prove yourself to the government, right? As an entity, right? So the government, for example, will give money to small companies if they have a real good track record with the government already. That's when they will give them grants. Otherwise, they're willing to give small business grants, which they call SBIRs or STTRs, which you would need to share a portion of with a nonprofit organization such as a university to bring your idea to fruition. The future phases of SBIR or STTR can have less and less involvement with the nonprofit.
Got it. Okay.
The whole idea behind it is that you probably don't have all the tools that you need already, as a small business to succeed, right? To make the prototype, to do whatever it is you need to do, right?
Right.
That's why they suggest to team up with a nonprofit.
Got it. And if I were to do that with UC Berkeley, that's something that could be done through this program.
That's not this program. It's something that can be done through the SBIR or STTR. It goes through a different department, but usually the IP terms of all of those come to me. So they're really standard terms. They're not. But as part of IPIRA and as part of the Begin program, there's also SBIR and STTR resources. And a lot of times talks on SBIRs, for example, or STTRs come around the campus. And if you're interested, you should attend, because they do provide how to be successful at getting these grants.
Okay. I assume that's on IPIRA website.
I'm hoping that it is someplace on IPIRA. Yes, on IPIRA or Begin. I know that our website is rather huge.
Yeah. Okay. I'll take some time to check out what's on IPIRA and then circle back with any more specific questions. But yeah, overwhelming it already is.
It's fun. It's all good. Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for your support and for this meeting.
Welcome, of course. I hope your technology comes to fruition.
Me too.
Awesome.
Ramo, thanks again for joining us.
Of course, yeah. This is a really good first step for me, because a patent is something that's been on my mind for quite some time, and IPIRA was a really good reason for me to actually, make the investment of this education. So,
Awesome.
all right. We'll be in touch. Yeah.
Of course. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, Laleh, thank you again so much for this discussion, this opportunity to have you join our students. I do apologize that it was a small group.
It's okay.
I think there were some. Yeah, I think there were some. We did record it, so we can share. And Ashley's going to help us edit the recording too, and just kind of clean it up a little bit. We had 8 total registrants, and I know that some of them had issues logging in, and that was my fault. But yeah, I know that the ones that were here Really did appreciate it. I'm glad that Ronald was asking so many questions as well. And
You
he had some
always
really
have
good
that
ones.
one or two. Yeah, you always have that one or two who are awesome. So that's all good.
Yeah, and we're gonna expand the website and include a little bit, because we felt like Ronald asked some good questions in there, so we want to create a little bit more of a FAQ, or we were thinking about creating, you know, a little bit more of a FAQ on the webpage and incorporating some of those questions that might help address some more of students' general questions about the competition as well.
Great.
But yeah, again, just really appreciate your time, and really look forward to having you for the next one. Hopefully we'll have a larger turnout. We are definitely pushing and promoting this competition as much as possible. Do you by chance recall how many folks joined for the last one, the session that was led last year, just for comparison's sake?
I think 5 or 6 groups joined, and we ended up having 5 patent applications. Yes.
Okay, got it. Well, and thank you again for your time, and Tarek as well, and Jennifer. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah, and Layla, thank you so much for this.
Of course, no problem. Great to see you in person, Jen. Well, see your face.
I'm back.
Yeah.
No, really nice.
And talk with you all soon.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.
Sounds great.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.